Hello, everyone. I'm Alec Farquhar from the Disability and Work Canada Steering Committee. And today I'm introducing an important session focusing on bridging the gap between workers with disabilities and employers who want an inclusive workplace but lack the tools and knowledge. This is called the Inclusive Employment Advocacy Project. Unfortunately, there's often a gap between the job search and employment experience of persons with disabilities and the capacity and confidence of employers to recruit persons with disabilities. The Alliance for Equality of Blind Canadians came together to launch the Inclusive Employment Advocacy Project, and this resulted in the Disability Advantage Training Program, which has been delivered to a number of major employers. This panel will describe the origins, development, and delivery of the program. I'm very pleased to have three presenters, all from the Alliance for Equality of Blind Canadians, who played a crucial role in the development of the project. But what we'll do is we'll start the presentation with a video where you'll get a hands-on idea of what the project was all about with sort of a live version of a training session. Then we'll have Yin Brown. She's a Toronto chapter member of Alliance for Equality of Blind Canadians, past chapter president and project director. She'll describe how the program was collaboratively built, grounded in the job-seeking experiences of persons with disabilities. We'll then move to Minette Samaroo. Minette is the National Vice President of AEBC and President of the Toronto chapter. She'll provide an overview of how the project was developed and how, in a general way, they met the objective of bridging the gap between workers with disabilities and employers who lack the tools and knowledge, looking at data collection, the design, successes and challenges. And we'll finish off with Christine Zannier. Christine is from the Toronto chapter, where she's secretary, and she will review the evaluation, feedback, and testimonials from the employers who received the training. This is really an important session because persons with disabilities developed it. They reached out to others, a real diverse group of persons with disabilities, and then they found a way to link with employers. So I know you'll get a lot out of this presentation, and I look very much forward to the discussion period following. Thank you.
This is the story of a project that has come so far and helped so many. A series of different clips appear on the screen, cutting back and forth between one another. One features a conference hosted in a large, urban, somewhat crowded meeting hall on World Accessibility Day, and the other shows scenes of an accessibility training workshop held at Microsoft headquarters. Before fading to black, the montage ends on a clip of a woman speaking from a leather couch. A flaming logo fades in and out, titled Bonfire Productions. White gradually covers the screen and text appears labeled, "The Alliance for Equality of Blind Canadians presents the Inclusive Employment Advocacy Project." Now in Phase 2, the Disability Advantage Training Program. Dissolve to the woman sitting on the leather couch from earlier.
My name is Minette Samaroo, and I'm the president of the Alliance for Equality of Blind Canadians and the project lead for the Inclusive Employment Advocacy Project Extension 2019.
Cut to a woman in white conducting an accessibility training workshop on a whiteboard.
The initial phase of the Inclusive Employment Advocacy Project is to gather data from job seekers with disabilities on the barriers that they're faced with when seeking employment. We gather three main barriers. One is requesting accommodations. The other is
back to Minette.
Job coaches and counselors are not equipped enough to support the job seeker with a disability. And the other is finding meaningful employment.
Back to the workshop.
So based on that information we gathered from job seekers with disabilities, we find that it is not only the job seeker with a disability that needs to be trained and equipped,
Minette,
but also the employment agency staff and the employer. So the second phase focuses on training and educating employment agency staff on how to
the workshop.
Support a job seeker with a disability and to train and educate employers on how to recruit, hire, accommodate, and work with persons with disabilities.
The scene cuts back and forth between Minette and the workshop.
As one of the employers we delivered the training workshop to was Microsoft. And even though Microsoft is already an inclusive employer, they've learned something new from our training workshop.
The woman in white sits at a table, being interviewed in a boardroom at Microsoft headquarters, Toronto.
Hi, I'm Lisa Kelly, and I'm a corporate trainer. So we were working today with Microsoft to talk to them about inclusive employment of people with disabilities, and really sharing the idea that hiring people with disabilities is no different than hiring anyone else, and there's actually a lot of benefits.
Her interview is cut with scenes from the workshop and the International Day of Persons with Disabilities conference.
Well, I think what's interesting here is because a lot of people want to work in this space, want to be inclusive. They just don't know how. So it's the practical elements of making sure that people can have a safe space to ask the questions that they need to in order to actually move forward. So we're moving beyond the message of just this is a good thing to do, this is the right thing to do. We're actually talking about here's how you do it. I particularly thought that the Alliance did a great job in that respect. The number one barrier that people with disabilities face is actually stigma and unconscious bias. And when we get right down to it, people don't even have a clear idea of what disability is. They tend to think of it as an impairment, as something other. And when we other people, it means that we don't want to be around them, we don't want to include them. So then they aren't in the workforce, we don't see that reflected, we don't ever build a comfort level that this is just part of the normal range of human experience. So workshops like this, not only everybody who trained here has a disability, they're getting comfortable from that perspective, but they're also hearing messaging and sharing real stories around disability that break down that unconscious bias and the stigma.
Michael Nowina speaks into a microphone at the Disability Conference.
So the biggest takeaway from the program for us was an awareness that when we are hiring, we have to ensure that we're doing it in such a way that people are even aware of the job postings and that they feel that if they apply, that they're going to get a fair chance.
Dissolve back to Minette.
The Disability Advantage Training Program is a must-have for employers and employment agencies
Different speakers talk to a microphone.
because it's already making a difference in the way employers recruit and hire. They are including that one question in their hiring process is, how can I accommodate you? That is very significant. Sponsor a project that's making a real difference for the most vulnerable.
Text appears reading, "To receive this training material, or to have interactive Disability Advantage training workshops delivered to your business, please contact the AEBC Toronto chapter at aebctoronto@gmail.com or call 647-947-9022. From the Alliance for Equality of Blind Canadians, this has been the Inclusive Employment Advocacy Project Phase 2, the Disability Advantage Program. This project is sponsored by the City of Toronto. The screen fades to black.
I like to describe the Inclusive Employment Advocacy Project that Alliance for Equality of Blind Canadians, AEBC, Toronto chapter, have designed and implemented in 2017 and 2018. It was grounded in the job-seeking experience, resourcefulness, and the mutual support among people with disabilities. And here are the 5 sections that I like to quickly go over. How the project was conceived and designed, our outreach to the diverse disability community, the components of the project, findings from the project, and lessons learned and future potentials. First, the project conception and design. As mentioned, the project was initiated, designed, and implemented by AEBC Toronto chapter members to address the employment barriers and the service gaps, especially among the employment service providers in Toronto. We wanted to make sure that the project staff, the facilitators, the participants, the mentors and mentees were people from diverse disabilities. We wanted to tap into the resourcefulness, the resiliency in dealing with these employment barriers. This was not a research project. It is a community-led participatory action project to share and collectively strategize in overcoming or dealing with the employment barriers that we ourselves experience. Too often, the disability community are exploited by researchers, able-bodied researchers, where data is collected from our community without giving back. And I don't mean gift cards. There were academic researchers in our project. However, they understood that the research data and the findings were not to be part of a research or a publication. Second, our engagement and outreach to the disability community. We wanted to ensure across disability with intersectionality, so we reached out to up to 50 community organizations, disability organizations, employment service providers. So those serving women, youth, LGBTQ, racialized, immigrant, all kinds of population groups. So there were 88 participants from these diverse disability groups participating in the focus groups. And there were between 8 to 22 participants in each of our workshops. There were 12 pairs of mentors and mentees in our second year. So overall, there was good representation from the diverse disability groups and the intersectionality of the women, the youth, the LGBTQ. However, we did not we're not able to engage people from the Indigenous and deaf community. Third, the three components of the project. We ran 6 focus groups to identify the needs of the job seekers with disabilities. Again, looking at their experiences and then from the focus groups, identify the top 5 areas where there were barriers. So from the findings from the identification of the 5 areas, we developed 5 workshops or education sessions that would sort of address these 5 areas, and we secured subject matter experts, often from the employment service sector, and more often than not, they were also people with lived experience of disabilities to run these workshops. In the second year, we had, as mentioned, the mentorship where we had 12 pairs of them. We used a participant-centered approach where the mentee directed how the employment self-advocacy, how it would take place. Some wanted to approach employment service providers, others wanted to directly approach employers, and others wanted to sort of look at supports for entrepreneurial projects. So now I'd like to talk about the findings from the project, or rather from the participants. As expected, government-funded employment service providers or employment programs are often not adequate for job seekers with disabilities. Even employment service providers that were supposed to be specifically for people with disabilities. Often the job developers or career counselors, they were not as appreciative of the assets, the values, the capabilities of job seekers with disabilities. So as a result, potential employees with disabilities, they get discouraged and they are still excluded from the workforce, even though they have great education and some work experience. So of course, we would like them to not, the employment service providers, not to reflect the same attitudes as the employers, but rather be the bridge between government policies and the actual employers to make sure that the workforce does become more diverse. They were supposed to be the experts on disability inclusion and advocates for clients with disabilities. On the other hand, job seekers with disabilities have to be better at self-advocacy. They must know their rights. They must know how to navigate the system, and they must be confident and resourceful to speak up for themselves. So, of course, after the 5 workshops, many participants found they were helpful. They learned a lot. But what was noticed is that participants themselves began to share more and more their own experience, their own techniques or tactics and strategies in accessing programs, fundings to help them along the employment journey. So it was really interesting to hear that people were sharing, sometimes more so than the facilitators. And as well, staff from employment service providers came to our workshop to learn from our participants, to find out what would be better, more appropriate for their clients with disabilities. In the second year, mentees who continued to approach employment service providers found some gaps in the service. For example, even though the employment service providers are supposed to serve people with disabilities, but they may not. They may just say, we serve people with this kind of disability, but not necessarily have the skill sets to serve groups from another disability. They may say, they did say, oh, we don't serve international students, even though they have work permits. They may cherry pick among the clients that they will choose to serve clients who fit their idea of the kinds of jobs that clients with certain disabilities should go into. So again, blind people, why don't you do call center? So if you don't fit that mold, it's harder to get service from them. Other things outside of the employment service providers are the incompatibility between adaptive services and the employers. So in Toronto, we have the Wheel-Trans service. It's a transportation service. However, their schedule may not match with the employer's rigid work hours. The more concerning is the changing technology. Adaptive technology is constantly changing, and old products are constantly updated. So employers expect the job seekers to know how to use the latest technology. However, technology is expensive, and the job seeker may not have the latest technology or have had training on using the latest version of the software. Older job seekers find this especially challenging. Again, a lot of job opportunities or the application process is online. So again, this may be a barrier because websites and platforms may not be accessible. Feedback from the mentorship, of course, they appreciated their mentor for their experience, not only in getting jobs or working at with the work experience, but also the self-advocacy experience that they have. Making the connections, vital connections between the job seeker and the most suitable job counselor or career counselor, or people in the field that they want to go into. And as mentioned, connecting them with the resources and the programs that might help them in their entrepreneurial projects or other ways of income generation. I think one aspect is often sort of taken for granted, but it should be mentioned, that the empathy, that you just know that you will be supported by mentors who have had the same experience, having to deal with the same barriers, and that's sort of emotional and understanding is really tremendous. Finally, the lessons learned and future potentials. Again, the twin track approach, where programs specifically for people with disabilities and programs that are disability inclusive. But even better, employment programs that are designed, developed, implemented by people with disabilities themselves, similar to this project. Of course, education and training for employment service providers, internships, mentorships, co-op programs that are specifically for persons with disabilities or inclusive of them. Career planning for university and college students with disabilities, especially in self-advocacy, just giving them the confidence that they can speak up for themselves. They can not demand, but strongly request that the programs, the services be appropriate for them. We even developed a tool that would track whether the rights of the job seeker and the responsibility of the employment service provider were upheld. Accountability, I think one of the suggestions was that why not have a public website where job seekers can give their feedback and their rating on the services that they have received from employment service providers, similar to their restaurants. Representation again. Ensure that government funding going to agencies that actually represent people with disabilities, so that government funding is not always funding able-bodied or organizations staffed and ran by able-bodied people serving people with disabilities. There are lots of organizations out there that are representative of the disability community, and funding should go to them, especially if you're talking about employment service. This also leads to an audit of the criteria for the funding. Oftentimes the criteria themselves become a barrier. Organizations representative or run by people with disabilities may not have all the sophisticated structure or financial statements and boards and all that as a sort of mainstream established organization, but sometimes they are the ones in most need of funding to pilot these employment service programs. Another suggestion is to broaden some of the existing programs. So for example, the enabling program, it's not just for large organizations. How about for small and medium-sized employers who can then provide the accommodations for their employees with disabilities? And again, we mentioned the adaptive device or technology. There's the ADP, Assistive Device Program, I think, where we have to update that program in Ontario so that there's more frequent funding of assistive devices so that people can actually have the devices or the software that's compatible with what the employers are using. These are the findings of our project, and I hope we can learn and even scale up on their implementation. Thank you.
Hello, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Minette Samaroo, and I am the president of the Alliance for Equality of Blind Canadians, Toronto chapter. I'm also the national vice president of the same organizations. I would like to take this time to thank all the organizers of the Disability and Work Canada Conference, especially Alec and Kathy, and all the others who have worked tirelessly to bring this program to success. Thank you very much. The Disability Advantage Program is an extension of the Inclusive Employment Advocacy Project. While there was tremendous success achieved with Phase 1 and 2, in that many mentees developed self-confidence, leadership, and advocacy skills, the data collected from this initiative highlighted the lack of training and education for employment agency staff and how to accommodate and support a job seeker with a disability, and also the lack of training and education for employers on how to recruit, hire, and accommodate persons with disabilities in the Canadian workforce. With this revelation, we realize that it is not only the job seeker with a disability who needs to be trained and equipped, with regards to employment, but also that it was imperative to take our training to the employment agencies and employers. And this is what led to the creation of the Disability Advantage Training Program. The purpose of this project is to train employment agency staff to support job seekers with disabilities and to train employers how to accommodate, hire, and work with employees with disabilities. The goals of the workshops are to dispel myths and misconceptions about hiring and working with persons with disabilities, demonstrate the benefits of welcoming persons with disabilities in the workplace, and provide tips and tools for working with this vast, untapped talent pool. A training manual was developed and designed by persons with disabilities to demonstrate these goals. To further demonstrate the diverse abilities of persons with disabilities, 8 training facilitators with disabilities were employed to deliver the training workshops. This strategy proved to be effective as the participants were more interactive with the facilitators as they integrated their knowledge on barriers and accommodation from their lived experience. AEBC was successful in securing training workshops for employers and for employment agencies. This include Microsoft Corporation and Baker & McKenzie LLP. Even though Microsoft is a diverse employer, the participants that attended the workshop acknowledged that they learned new ways to be inclusive. Because of the training workshop, Baker & McKenzie now include in their interview process the question, do you require accommodations? One of the challenges we faced was that employers were reluctant to sign up for the workshop because they believe they're already practicing diversity in their workplace. We persuade those who signed up by letting them know that the training workshop was free and that they have much to gain. Perhaps our biggest challenge is funding for the program. As our city funding came to an end, there is a pause for the program as we await further funding. In order to evaluate and analyze the Disability Advantage Program, the primary sources were the participants' evaluation reports, the training facilitators' reports, and observation reports. These 3 reports were compiled after each of the 8 training workshops. In addition to these 3 feedback methodologies, a 4th post-feedback questionnaire was sent to participants a few months after they received the training program. The purpose for the post-feedback was to ascertain whether the training program was effective in having these businesses and organizations incorporate what they learned into their recruiting, hiring, and accommodating processes. Many participants expressed interest in having more of the training workshops to the other staff of those who did not receive the first training. To learn more about the Disability Advantage Training Program, please go to our website at www.blindcanadians.ca. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. My name is Christine Zannier. Thank you, Alec, for the introduction. I was a project coordinator on this Disability Advantage program. And a little bit about myself and my journey as to how I got to this project. I became involved in the 2nd year of the Inclusive Employment Project as a mentor. And as I was participating as a mentor, I was working very closely with both Yin and Minette. And then subsequent to that, we had also hired on training facilitators to be able to deliver these training workshops. So I had the pleasure and continue to have the pleasure of working with the Alliance for Equality of Blind Canadians. So I'd like to tell you a little bit about the impact that this project and training program had on the employers and the community service agencies. As Minette had discussed, she talked about the design and the delivery of the training workshop. I just want to walk you through the participant evaluation, the feedback that we received from the employers, the participants in the training workshops, as well as our staff, our contract staff, the training facilitators, and other individuals that were part of this project. So in terms of the evaluation, we really wanted to find out from the participants what they thought of the program. And I'm happy to say that we had over 112 responses, which is very good, from 8 workshops. And the average survey completion rate from the training was 87%. And all of the surveys were completed after the training. There was no online completion of surveys. Everything was completed after the training in person. And I found that really led to the success of having that completion rate, because I have found in the past that surveys online are not always responded to. So in terms of the highlights, 90% rated good to excellent, that their desire to share what they learned with others. 89% found the facilitators to be engaging and effective. 89% also rated good to excellent on the content being relevant to their work. 86% rated good to excellent that the training motivated them to act, which is very important. Training workshops need action. 83% rated the duration of the workshop from good to excellent, so the timing was good. 81% rated good to excellent on the content being appropriate for the level of knowledge. And 77% rated good to excellent on learning something new from their training. So given the participant evaluations, we then looked at recommendations. So we reached out to our employers and community service agencies after the training and asked them for their recommendations. You know, if you could change, if you could improve, what were some of your recommendations? So what came out of it was that participants from most of the training workshops appreciated the space that was provided for discussion. So it was a confidential space where they were able to share their own stories. And they found that the facilitators who were doing the training actually had lived experience of a disability, and that really helped them open up and share their own unique stories. Some also suggested that audiovisual aids would certainly help in terms of the content. Multiple individuals said that it was important to apply more examples and provide more scenarios. And many of the participants found the training informative, and they wanted to see more resources. So at the midpoint of the training, there was an employer tip sheet that was created. That was a helpful tip sheet that was provided to employers to help them recruit and hire people with disabilities. Essentially a checklist that they could look at, that they could look at their job posting, they could look at their hiring process, their recruiting process, their onboarding process. And that was very helpful. And through these recommendations, there was definitely transformative change that the employers actually experienced. The training for the YMCA staff, they found that they were better able to market participants with disabilities to their employers. And they said that the program made them more effective in working with people with disabilities, particularly with their job placements. With the 519 community, the workshop gave them important time and space to discuss how to connect and support people with disabilities better. Another organization said that they've made minor changes to their application and interview process. And now they ask each and every applicant if they are in need of an accommodation or in support of being able to be successful in the interview or the hiring process. In terms of testimonials, Garth Nelson, the general manager at YMCA, said that the training provided our YMCA staff with the ability to better market participants with disabilities. And the 519 said that the best and most important part of the training was the dedicated opportunity to discuss our work environment and to ensure that these issues are better ingrained in their processes. So Elizabeth Novak was a training facilitator with the project, and she had said that participating in this project as a training facilitator was a wonderful experience. She said working as a facilitator allowed her to develop her leadership and her presentation skills to advocate for the need for more inclusive and accessible employment opportunities for employers. It was truly a worthwhile and motivating professional experience. And in terms of the feedback that we received after the training workshop, key piece of feedback was really around format and course content. So what we found were that the employers and community service agencies that we were working with were at different levels of understanding as well as knowledge and experience when working with people with disabilities. So one piece of advice was to find out and to create a program that had a basic, intermediate, and advanced content. We also looked at, in the future, looking at a fee-for-service model. And in conclusion, a key achievement from the program was that Baker McKenzie actually certified this program from the Law Society of Ontario, which will be very advantageous if we take this program into the future. We will be able to market this program to law firms specifically with this accreditation and certification. So overall, the project and the program were successful. Happy to say that there is continued interest in this program, and I do see us continuing it in the future. I'm happy to thank you very much for your time, and I'm happy to take your questions.